I think we're the last thing in front of will.i.am, so we'll really try to extend this out. Quick introductions. I'm actually Sean Corcoran, U.S. CEO of MediaHub. We're here to talk about the future of media, and when we talk about that, I think there's been a lot of talk, obviously, last year. Metaverse was the big topic. Now we have AI. We know a lot of stuff's, some of it's in the long window out, some of it more the shorter window, but we want to talk about the next 12 to 24 months. That's our big focus. So I'm just going to jump right into this because you did the intros. I'm going to have each of you folks just talk about what's your biggest, if we have to talk about the very first priority of all the things being talked about here at Cannes, all the things being talked about for the last couple of years, biggest priority for the next 12 to 24 months. Each of you come from a very different background across the ad tech, advertising, marketing spectrum. So Rachael, starting with you, number one concern, number one priority for you over the next 12 to 24 months.
Sure. So my name is Rachael Donnelly. I lead marketing for Experian Marketing. And in the next 12 to 24 months, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about what's happening in the economy, right? We're kind of coming into a little bit of a slowdown. As a marketer myself, the budget that I control is the first one to get a little bit of pressure once we start to see some pressure coming in from the economics. So for me, it's about performance. How do I increase my marketing performance? How do I continue to show ROI? And what's the data that I need to have to be able to do that and effectively get buy-in from the rest of the business to continue investing in my programs?
Real on the ground. Let's drive some business.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hi, Jeff Alderman from AdMedia. So biggest trend, I think, for us that we see really, the same thing around performance, but efficient growth at scale. I think a lot of people dabble and they don't give it enough oxygen and it runs out of air pretty quickly. But from a business side, like pure business driving profitability metrics, not just gross revenue, it's really that efficient scale. And people are really trying to overcome that amongst all the biggest change pillars that are happening. And some of them are out of their control and some of them are in their control.
Cool. My name is Rob Christensen. I'm SVP of U.S. Sales and Distribution at Vevo. Vevo is a joint venture of Universal Music and Sony Music, if you're not familiar. We are super focused on effectively bringing music videos back to the living room in the capacity of streaming television. So, it turns out people like watching music videos on television screens, which is really great for us. And ultimately, looking at the streaming TV landscape, our main concerns is, does it continue to fragment? Is there more mergers and acquisitions that do happen? And what does that mean for us as a publisher? I think there's a lot of opportunity for premium publishers in the CTV space to continue to define where we sit in that world and how we can provide a true national, how we can provide true national reach to our partners.
Nice. So let's get right to the sexy stuff. We'll talk data, and you're really the data lead. So we'll start with you, Rachael. I think when it comes to the data, like there's first-party data, second-party data, third-party data, zero-party data. There's data everywhere. We're talking about it all week long. I think one of the questions comes up for me is in the agency side is collaboration. What's everybody's role? How do we collaborate best when it comes to working with data across the board with the client? On your side of the fence, the agency side of the fence. How do you see the next 12 to 24 months playing out in terms of data collaboration, how we all should work with it in a way that's effective and not just a conversation about plumbing? Because I think that's feels like plumbing conversations all the time versus output and actually getting to outcomes that matter.
Yeah, I think we do have to have the plumbing conversation a bit, though, because when I was here last year, the topic of conversation were clean rooms. Everybody wanted to talk about clean rooms. Everything was about clean room. Do you have a clean room? I have a clean room. Are you building a clean room? So what we've actually found is that where it happens, collaboration, data collaboration, where it happens is actually not as important as the fact of actually collaborating. And so that's what our focus really is how can we help enable our customers, whether that's an agency, whether that's a brand, whether that's a measurement provider, whether that's a TV network. We're enabling collaboration across the board from a data perspective. I think the pipes are important to figure out how to share that data in a privacy compliant way, but also what do you actually do with it at the end of the day? Why do you want to collaborate with your data? Why do you want to have a better understanding of your consumer? Why do you want to measure performance and success? So it's the why and the how, but I think everybody knows they want to in some way.
What are the big obstacles? I mean, what does it gum up the system? Is it the silos? Like, where do you see it like really kind of coming up,
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, we started talking about clean rooms last year, and I mean, there's a clean room for everything. And when you talk to a brand, they will have different clean rooms within their brands. So it's almost like I've talked to somebody today that had they had one clean room for one business, and they had a totally different technology in another business. So not only is their data not collaborating across the business internally, but also then imagine that fragmented across all your channels, whether that's your programmatic, whether that's your supply buys and through publishers, whether that's TV, whether that's your measurement reporting. So it's very, very, very fragmented.
So on top of all the fragmentation, we're now fragmenting clean rooms.
Exactly.
That's messed up. Okay, great, cool. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, we definitely do not believe in the fox garden and the hen house of data, right? And a lot of the giants have done that for a long time. At the end of the day, we want to make sure we're using source of truth, right, for the business. And we'll integrate into really any system out there as well, right? So, but again, for us, search is a pillar of what we do. We have data on about 230 million people in the U.S., 1.9 trillion data calls a day coming through our pipes, right? But at the end of the day, too, it's about actions and business outcomes for sure, right? I think the fuzzy stuff is getting challenged, especially with budget constraining right now. It's where's the next dollar, why, and when. But data should be driving every single decision we do in real time, not just in the rears by a month or a quarter, et cetera, right? It needs to be as near real time as possible, which is also a challenge.
So the topic of data is also one of my concerns, which I neglected in my first answer. But the reason for that is, as a streaming TV network, we are free. So our content is free to air, right? That's the nature of our content. And so we're leaning heavily into free ad-supported streaming TV, or the fast environments, if you will. And the negative on that, although there's great opportunity, is that we're beholden to the data that we get passed back from the partners that we distribute to. And it becomes a very disparate access for us, depending on, do we get user profiles from this partner? Do we not from the other? We distribute to 35 platforms and growing around the world, so you can imagine how complicated that is. We do our best to then work with third parties and take what we get, and we put it in a pot. And
Do you see results though? I mean,
we do, but we also get asked for a lot more than we are able to offer. And it's an opportunity for networks and platforms to get together to sort of create a solution that unifies what can be shared across the board. Once that happens, it will be the biggest opportunity for both parties.
Okay, let's shift gears to the next kind of obvious thing. The death of the cookie, which is supposed to happen someday. Google's feeling 2024 now. They're really adamant that's when it's going to happen, but we know something's coming. So, Jeff, starting with you, I think probably impacts you, and Rachel will get to you too, but I think for you, how are you looking at this? I mean, we've had time to prep, I guess, so how are you guys feeling about, that change, and what's the plan on your end to address it?
It's a welcome change, right? I mean, cookies from a measurement perspective were invented in the industry over 20 years ago, right? They were never meant to be the...
Probably 25, really.
Right?
Go back
Well,
that
yeah,
far, right?
I've been in the industry
90s,
for 27 years, right? And so cookies were, you're right, around then for banners, right? At the end of the day, though, they were never meant to last really that long, if you think about it. And they were never really meant to be across everything. We actually have been planning for it and building it in R&D for 5 years. We actually have a patent on contextual.com. So at the end of the day, there's crawler technology, data, and many other things fueling that growth. We launched it 10 months ago, pretty quietly at a MediaPost webinar, and we're their most attended webinar in MediaPost history. So a lot of demand against that. All based on first-party data. So again, when Google finally pulls the trigger with GA, if it's tied to GA4 rollout or after that, there's a lot of speculation. It will be a disruptor, not just across search, right, but across all tactic types as well. So again, it goes back to the fox guard and the hen house too, right? So if you have a solution in place, hopefully there's a plan B and a plan C. Right, so whatever's invented today.
Modeling? Like, what are we talking about here?
So again, for us, it's our own tech stack. So DMP, DSP, SSP, across that. So it's a universal ID at a profile level that we can track across the ecosystem.
Are you concerned there's going to be too many IDs?
No, look, I think there's talks of universal IDs and
Of course, there's talks to everything. We're talking
correct, right? So at the end of the day, it's again, there's got to be, again, back to the IAB standards, right? There's got to be some collaboration across the industry, across key players, not just one or two people by de facto inventing that, right? So there could be, just like in the offline world, UDIDs. Right? What's the right solution? Again, I think whatever comes out initially will not be the solution that we see in the next 5 years after that either.
Rachael, how are you thinking about this? I mean, IDs are more in your world, obviously, but like, yeah, what's your take?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we play in the ID space every day, all day, right? Our perspective is that we are ID and signal agnostic. So whether those signals are identifiers, whether they're other types of things that help us understand a consumer, whether it's offline behaviors, online behaviors, we are an enabler of connection and collaboration and addressability regardless of the signal. So for us, we've been prepping for cookies deprecating for years. It's kind of, if you haven't been, you should really be thinking about it because it's inevitable. And cookies are going to continue to decline in value. There's a measurement concern, right? So we have to be thinking about measurement probably in a different way, and I think there will be some disruption in that space. But if you haven't started thinking about it, it's almost like non-news anymore at this point. Like, it's going to happen. Let's move on. Let's think of a better alternative at this point.
How do you feel about client brand adoption, though, on that side of the fence? Are they ready? Like the people you're working with on the client side or other partners, are they ready? Like, you seem ready for it. Are others ready for it?
I think that we're helping them get ready for it because it's a little bit of the boy who cried wolf. It was supposed to happen years ago, so they all rushed. I was actually at an agency at that time and spent a lot of time talking to clients about what was going to happen when this went away. And to this point, the clients don't want to be dependent on something like that that's so volatile. They want something that's going to be more future-proof and that will allow them to have the right signals depending on who it is, because clients may have different ideas of what is a valuable signal for them. Some might want a cookie, some might want a IP address, some might want a maid, some might want a Roku ID. It's very different. Everybody is different in how they're going to be looking at their consumers and what they find to be the most valuable. And so I really think fragmentation is going to happen. And it's going to be a little bit different. There'll be some consolidation, but at the end of the day, I think we'll be better for it because we'll build something that's a little bit more purposeful than a cookie.
That makes sense. And Jeff, are you seeing the same thing from the adoption side? Like, are you feeling like it's all, we're good, we're ready to go?
Yeah, so, I think, too, when you talk about different verticals, some are a lot farther along. I spent 8 years in the payment space, actually, battling Jack Dorsey. So it's surprising we're here at the Twitter former beach, right? Battling him for 8 years, right? And so we were one of 4 companies listed at his IPO roadshow when he went public. So, but again, some industries like financial have it thought through a lot deeper. A lot of traditional retailers do as well have an inside track, right? For customer IDs or other modeling from an offline perspective that is getting kind of resurfaced, actually. But yeah, there definitely will be fragmentation if there's not data passbacks. We have about 300 signals across the ecosystem on people. So again, for us, it's a click ID could be one little thread through it. But again, we want to make sure we're honing into the true bottom line metric for the advertiser. So again, that means passback needs to happen.
Cool. Let's shift gears slightly and Rob, get into your world a little bit. You talked about the changes that you're seeing in terms of, like, on one hand, people are still watching music videos, which is a great thing to hear as someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s. But when it comes to data tech, it brings you to a lot of audience data, right? And how that might inform your content, your programming. How are you guys thinking about that on your end? And what's it mean from an impact in the next couple of years?
Yeah, for sure. So we work really closely with all of our distribution partners to learn as much as we can about their audiences. We observe a lot when we see where our ads get served in our server throughout the country. Ultimately, we know who watches Vevo historically on YouTube because that's where we were born in 2009. But they are a massive partner of ours, but we have 34 other distribution partners that do have unique audiences. We can no longer assume that watching streaming TV is one-to-many like broadcast. And so ultimately we do collect, you mentioned Roku IDs, and any ID that we can get from our partners about their users, their audience, it helps infuse how we should kind of addressably program, if you will, on each individual platform. We want to be the most relevant. We want to program the most relevant content that we can and not just assume that we know about our own partners' audiences. So that's a big difference when you think about how to program for a network moving forward. It's also a big opportunity. And we plan on using our own data, which we call Vevo Intelligence, to help us target better, but also create more immersive and more relevant curated programming experiences on our fast channels around the country, or around the world, actually.
Yeah, and in terms of there's just a vast amount of competition. I mean, from TikTok to YouTube to Netflix to all of it. Are there particular things you're looking for in that data, or is like how do you think about that programming side of it?
Well, first of all, I want to be careful about the competition. It's cool that you said it, but the competition piece. There, I mean, we're very complimentary to actually all of those brands that you just mentioned and platforms. Many of them are great partners of ours. So it's just, we need to just be careful about the term versus. You know, I think there's a world that we can work together. It's very much like how networks and MVPDs work together for a very long time. There's IP and there's platforms, and that's how we approach it. And at the onset of our deal structure and our deal terms, we do speak a lot about not just how will our network get promoted and discovered, but also the types of info that we would like to get back from them as much as possible. Frankly, starting with just male, female, and demo information is great, but also their interests and you know, their likeness when it comes to music and also pop culture. We have a vast library and a very inclusive audience. We have 800,000 music videos in our library, and so it represents a very diverse artist set, and it's our responsibility. It's a great responsibility for us to best represent them out there and help our artists find the most relevant audiences through as much data as we can collect.
Nice. Let's talk about walled gardens. And we've talked about last few years, but we saw kind of the breakdown a little bit of with TikTok kind of coming in so strongly. It kind of broke down the Meta Google domination this past year. Is the first time they didn't have more than half a digital ad spend. When we look at it from MediaHub's perspective, we start talking about a platform-based world. Some people call it a nichified world, or we talk about it in bubbles, maybe it's an appified, whatever you want to call it. But we're seeing former TV networks, or what were TV networks, building ad IDs. We got Roku buying Kubi's content. You know, the NBA and the NFL are building out their own IDs. Like we're kind of like seems like every former publisher or media content platform is becoming its own little walled garden in a sense. How should we all be thinking about this? So the cookie going away, fragmentation occurring, and now we have kind of all these different stacks or systems that we all have to work across. How are each of you thinking about living and doing your thing within that kind of a world? So we'll start with you, Rachael.
I think this is almost like a second part to the earlier question around collaboration, right? It's the fragmentation is continuing because people are realizing that signal loss is happening, whether it's through regulation, whether it's through cookie deprecation. And so they're looking back at their own owned and operated data assets. They're digging deep into their first-party data. They're looking at the type of people that are visiting their websites, and they're trying to figure out a way to use that to either have a better user experience or to monetize that for somebody into, say, commerce. Everybody talks about retail media networks, but they're commerce networks, right? You have people that are not retailers that are creating these media networks. And I think there's going to continue to be a proliferation. Everything that's old becomes cool again. So data and contextual data, we're seeing a big increase in people looking for demo and interest and lifestyle type of audiences again. We're going to continue to see that, and then what's going to be really important.
Context is back, right?
Context is back, right? You heard it here first. So once that kind of continues, then your people are going to want to tie back to the signal that they still have, and brands are going to want to come in and engage with these other brands or whatnot. And it's all back to collaboration. So what does collaboration look like in the future? So we've kind of come full circle.
Yeah, just to add on to that too, because we at AdMedia have two sides of the house. So not just AdMedia for brands and advertisers, but we also own Monetize, right? And so we work with the largest publishers out there. Some of them are the largest publishers of the giants as well. because of a better user experience, and also for data, right? So because there was a retraction of data, right, by some of the giants over the last 24 months, which hurt the publishing side of the business as well, right? And so data and publishers are always looking for monetization or yield monetization, revenue growth as well. Just like advertisers and brands here are looking for, again, that incremental revenue growth or business outcome as well. So again, there's definitely some challenges with fragmentation and connecting of the dots to make it a clearer picture across many platforms that we've seen. I think the retail network side of it as well is pretty interesting. Some of the biggest brands in the retail network space are huge brands, and you would think traffic is not an issue with them, and it clearly has been. So we've kind of helped prop some of them up as well. But again, that ties back into the data that they have in their systems to help fuel it and increase that kind of yield monetization as well on their end.
Does it change, as a follow-up to probably both of you, and does it change how your teams work, who your teams are? Like, have you thought about that at all? Is it just more like a continued evolution of what we're doing?
Yeah, so for us, there's a lot of investment that we're making into development, but also user experience of our systems. So it's definitely, again, bringing on, as a global team, a lot of growth. There's a lot of changes happening, obviously, especially here. So that has been a shift. I think, if anything, it actually is shifting the business to be, again, more agile, right, from a platform perspective, but also from a user interface side to provide custom APIs, custom reports directly to brands, because that ask is always continuing to evolve. But that's definitely been a big focus for us as well. So that's been changing. Again, for us, that will continue to evolve, and that will continue to be an investment.
Has it changed you?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's more that the teams that we're supporting are changing. Our teams, our clients are becoming more technical. They're trying to handle more data. They're trying to do some things that they've never done before, like stand up a media network. I don't know how many brands have had that experience before, right? So I think it's how can we continue to be agile, enhance the way that we're able to work with them through technology and data, and just be faster. And that's maybe where, as cliche as it sounds, because everyone's talking about AI right now, but it's how do we start to use some sort of modeling, additional intelligence, so that we can be faster and quicker to the game as it continues to shift, because it's only going to get faster.
So Rob, let's get to you, and then we'll talk about TV too, because I want to get to that next.
Yeah, sure. I just quickly, I think the notion of all this comes down to the protection of intellectual property, right? So you create, and the downside of that over time is you create many more smaller opportunities that are limiting in terms of the ceiling for each of them, because right now intellectual property is still really important. It's still king. At some point down the line, I don't know when, I would think within the next 5 years or so, there'll have to be some sort of unifying approach in the market that gives platforms and other individual properties, you mentioned NBA and others, that agree what data can be shared and passed through each of them, so that the overall ecosystem can grow together. Right now, it feels like a little bit of a land grab for each of what everyone owns. And having seen so much of the fast pace when networks and platforms and IDs, at some point in time, I think you have to ask yourself, are you a network, are you a platform, or are you a studio? Right. You definitely are in all three. And start have to making those choices and then build your business off that. I know what we are. We're a network, but having said that, there's a lot of people trying to be different things right now.
So what does that mean to you, though, in terms of what you're building internally, and like how it looks different from someone who is something else?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we are building based off what the strength of our content, right? Which is free to air, it's pop culture, and we want to get the infrastructure out there for fans everywhere to have access to our content. That's first. Utilize our own data to help run the network as best we possibly can, but we need to infuse our partners' data as much as we possibly can to get to what we call the holy grail down the line, and that's what's limiting right now. But I do think we get to a point where I don't know if it's governance, I don't know exactly what happens, like how the TV ecosystem has always been governed in terms of like basic templates for inventory shares and data that you're allowed to get passed back. It's probably where we're going within the FAST space and the CTV space. So for me, just plan for that.
So let's talk about TV.
Yep.
It's changing, finally, I would say that, right? It's
Yeah.
like the last frontier for me, like in a lot of ways, is coming from the digital world, is like, finally this is changing. How are you thinking about, with connected TV and however you want to define that? I have multiple people give me multiple definitions, frankly,
Yeah.
as well as addressable, which has been around, but it's still kind of growing, and then still kind of leftover linear, and then kind of like your digital world of the YouTube, TikTok, and where you all fit, and like how you're thinking about the next 12 to 24 months in the, we'll call it the quote-unquote TV space, and
Sure. Yeah, we could define it a bunch of different ways.
Right.
So we don't have to go down that road right now, but ultimately, we're talking about content that lives on a TV screen no matter how it gets there. So whether it's IP delivered or delivered traditionally or whatever it might be. So that's important. I think, like a lot of the social platforms that have their content casted onto a television screen, to me, that still counts. And ultimately, we have a cross-platform presence that includes mobile and desktop, but we look at our television business as a bifurcated opportunity, standalone, and then beyond that, we could extend reach for, and negotiate whether it's for efficiencies or not on mobile and desktop. So we're just thinking in different ways for us to package our screens, how we price them, how we program them differently. We always see, which is why what led us here, that the user and viewer behaviors on all three screens or all the screens are different. So in which case, doesn't make a lot of sense to treat them the same. And that's been really the basis of how we got here. 4 years ago, we saw a bunch of our mobile viewership shift to a television screen just organically because of the proliferation of smart TVs and obviously of the OTT platforms. And so we've really leaned in, and now with FAST on the rise, we think that's the true opportunity for us to lean in FAST with the VOD experience that backs it. And just get better at programming in that environment, and obviously get us the best deal
I mean,
tunes
that's got to
we
be
can.
challenging, obviously, right? In this
sure.
environment, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other piece, which I'm glad you just reminded me, is content discovery.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, thanks, bud. Content discovery is a massive challenge and concern for any publisher in these networks, or for any publisher on platforms. I feel that there's a great presence for O&O channels in FAST and also apps inside platforms, and there's a bit of a bias there when it comes to a platform that would like their content or their channel to get viewed first. So we have to get creative on that. Luckily, we have a great partnership with most of our partners where they are interested in our IP and the artists that we represent. So we utilize those assets to help drive viewership and awareness, but it has to evolve. That's a basic tactic, which is marketing that we negotiate. So we just have to get better and better using data with how we program and how relevant we can become in each of those environments.
Cool. All right, we've gone this far without saying AI, so AI. I think we have to talk about that. I truly believe it's a game changer. I believe that. Like Metaverse last year, I had a really hard time talking to clients. I'd be like, okay, this is a thing that could happen and could be great. But there's, it's kind of, we did some fun stuff in it, but AI, like machine learning's been around, right? It's not new. Neural networks, all those things have been around, and we've all been using them to some degree in the background. Now we all have to kind of bring out front and go, no, I've been doing it, I swear. But Rachel, for you, what's AI been doing for your business? How do you think about it, and what's the plan in the next 2 years, and what it means for you?
Sure. So coming from a data and identity technology company, we've been using modeling and different levels of artificial intelligence to help inform the creation of our audience segmentation, as well as our creation of an understanding of an identity from a household or individual perspective. So it's modeling our understanding of identifiers. It's modeling our understanding of consumer behavior into more understandable profiles and targetable audiences in different platforms. So we've been doing that for a while. I think for now, what we're thinking about is how do we actually make that accelerate, use that same type of technology, advances in this technology to totally accelerate the work that we're doing from speed to market. How do we anticipate changes like the deprecation of the cookie, and how do we make our understanding of an identity and those signals more resistant to change. So that's something that we're thinking about constantly. And then from a personal perspective, I had ChatGPT actually plan my meal plan for the week the other day, add all the items to Instacart, and all I had to do was hit purchase. It was
Good?
quite interesting, yeah. I was like, how can we really start to use this in our day-to-day?
Nice. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, so we've had assisted machine learning's running for over 15 years, right? So same thing as far as modeling, segmentation, next dollar spent, right, as far as planning purposes. But again, the why and the where should it go? Again, for us, there's a lot of iteration of testing. If it's ad copy testing with search or landing page testing iterations, it does free up a lot of the back-end resources at times. But again, it's as good as the inputs, right? Right, and so I think some of the resistance from the team originally were like, oh great, let's play with this, and now my SEO just went away, right? I don't need to do any SEO because all the content got done in 6 minutes. Make it 60%, but it's got to be on tone, on voice, on strategy from a content perspective, not just from a creation standpoint. Right, but at the end of the day, too, I think it really gets into kind of that iterative, quick, agile testing. What's your confidence threshold that you're comfortable with, and move forward. But again, we have 1 million domains literally that we own and operate. That's where the company started. So some of them we do a lot of sandbox testing with, like leisure.com for travel as an example, or stockprices.com, right? And so for us, it is a big sandbox that we use for testing, for SEO purposes. I see that just accelerating growth for a lot of businesses as well. But again, do it the right way. It's got to be on point for you. It's not copy paste and you're done, unfortunately.
Yeah, for us on the ad side, like you said, machine learning, we've been using that for quite some time through our own data scientists to create things like what we call Vevo intelligence around contextual advertising placements and audience intelligence to help us project and create proxies across 35 different platforms that we do distribute to, like I mentioned. On the content side, I'd say we're monitoring it. Our head of comms is right there, so I have to be careful what we say, but we're monitoring it. As a reminder, we do not, on our library, in our CMS, we do not have any user-generated content. The Vevo watermark on a video really signifies that it is an officially licensed, produced, copyrighted, professional music video. So from that perspective, none of that will, we're not going to have a generative AI tool kind of produce a music video in our CMS, but we're monitoring it for sure.
Curate and recommend?
Curate, recommend. I think where my head goes is what can it do for our industry on a media planning level? What can it do for us on helping with programming, as I mentioned, as a big part of our growth? So we're definitely monitoring, all of that, but right now we've been laser focused on how it can help us make ads more relevant to our users at the right time in the right place.
Cool. I think one last question. We'll wrap it up. I think the creative part is brought up, and each of you work, on some form of the ad tech / media side of it too. But to me, creative is such an enormous white space. It's the one area we've been optimizing media down to the nub for years now, and there's such an opportunity with it. Are you seeing any movement in that area? What are your thoughts on, could AI and some of these future technologies help with bringing the message forward, being the creative or whatever it is that, we're trying to actually communicate through our paid media or other media? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, right? It should be helping. I think from our perspective, we're looking at it from a content. So if we're working on our marketing campaigns, how can we test different messages? If we're looking at it from just the generation of the content itself. So we're really trying to test it in kind of small batches to see what's created. But if you think about it on the much larger scale, you can be using data to inform and create the best content and the best creative to have the right results based on whatever your business objectives are. I think there's a long way for us to go to get to kind of the ideal state, but that's why we have to test it. It's all machine learning. We have to give it information so that it can learn, and it'll get better over time, and we'll learn more about how to use it.
The creatives are going to love that.
Yeah, yes, exactly. But it doesn't take away from the work that they're doing. It's more how can we be faster in some capacity.
Sure.
Yeah, so creative, we found just iterative testing with it, it's about a 20 to 30% gain in lift when we're doing that. But we'll start with baselining against like a Google or somebody of that nature, and even use that as our kind of jumping off point. But again, every platform does perform differently. Creative sometimes does perform differently. Especially when you're talking about things like QSRs and restaurants, there's a lot of creative testing in there about LTOs and locations and kind of rapid testing with that as well. Sure, we do a lot of dynamic content and creation and injections when possible, when we're allowed. But some brands and some spaces, like pharma as an example, you cannot do it, right? It's too risky. Same thing with some, insurance or financial service industries, right? A little bit too risky. We'd like to push the envelope as far as we can, but that's where we work with, collaboration of our agency partners and our brands as well to come back to the table, put together kind of an iterative test plan for the quarter, and say what are the elements that we want to test, what are the assets we have, and what do we need to build on your behalf.
Yeah, just lastly, it's an extension of what I was just talking about with our audience intelligence and our the ability to be contextually relevant within a full network. We have a big library, 800,000 videos, as I mentioned, and ultimately it's a great chance for us to test and get creative that can really match and deliver the most relevant experience for brands and for viewers, which creates the maximum opportunity for a campaign. So it's a big, it is a big focus of ours for sure, and I think there's a lot of learnings moving forward. But we have a few products in market. I'll call Moods is one where we match creative to certain moods of music videos and artists, so that it's at times you don't quite know where the ad starts and the video begins and where the ad ends again. Really seamless opportunities there, and I think not just for us but for networks across the board is smart ways for you to use that and then implement for the best possible experience.
Let me ask this last question. We didn't prep it, so forgive me. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
But Rob, we'll start with you and come back down. Last piece of advice for people. I wanted to talk about the future of media, but I want to do it in a pragmatic way, which is, I think, really important. What's your advice to brands, agencies, whoever, for the next 12 to 24 months? Any last thoughts that you want to give?
Honestly, I mean, there's so much going on, right? I feel like sometimes I think you said what's old is new again, and it's ironic, but that's what we joke and say sometimes with music, with our content, right? It's like, yeah, it was born 43 years ago, and here we are again, bringing it back to the surface. And I think when it comes to media planning, honestly, sometimes what's old is new again. We have to really look at the construct of the marketplace and think about platforms and audiences and what's incremental and what's duplicative and what isn't. And what level of content should be owned versus what level of reach should be bought through platforms. And it's that type of conversation that I would just say, be cognizant of the content you're running in and how does that augment the platforms that you're buying for reach. And I think it's a basic thought that we've been really doing for a long time, but we can overcomplicate this. And I would recommend not.
Yeah, I think, being in the industry for 27 years, I mean, the one constant's change, right? We don't know what we don't know, right? And, events like this are fantastic. We're speaking and sponsoring at 98 events in person this year, actually. So the best ideas are coming from people that you wouldn't necessarily see those ideas coming from in different environments, right? So don't overthink it. Give people the space to come together. I think that's part of the challenge between agencies and brands right now is the space is getting shrunken down, and people have to give the space back, right, for people to really come together, and not in a forced way. So we're actually investing in Island Ad Fest, which is we're bringing together 100 CMOs during Halloween. We're taking over the Ritz-Carlton Reserve in Dorado, Puerto Rico, to get everyone together to continue events like this, but in a more intimate way, right? Here it's great, but people are running around to everything. The collaboration is probably
More
not
focus, maybe?
a little focus. Great scenery there as well, I've heard. But it'll be a big bet, right? And it's done with the intention of bringing the top marketers in the world together to learn from each other.
You kind of just took my word. I was going to say focus. We've talked about a lot of topics today, whether it's cookie deprecation, whether it's AI, whether it's creative, whether it's collaboration. And I think from a marketer's perspective, it's a lot. There's a lot going on, and we're continuously under pressure. So how can we focus on what is the most important for us that is going to help us drive our business objectives and that growth? And so my recommendation for anyone here is have the focus and be diligent about what it is that you're trying to achieve.
I always like to say, choose what you're not going to do, right? It's like the classic strategy thing. But anyway, with that, we'll wrap up. I want to thank you to the panelists and thank you to all of you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.